Welcome everyone to Be a Game Changer 2.0, week number 3. This week we are going to be exploring critical thinking and problem solving. I wanted to be clear though, before we get into that, I wanted to make sure we were welcoming everybody tonight and thanking Technology Enabled Learning Ontario. They, of course, are our sponsors for this event. And so they are funding it, and we wanted to make sure we did a big shout out to them for all of their support. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Andy Quishan from Duffer & Peel, who will be talking a little bit about our session.
Great, so thank you. So with tonight, we are going to be gathering together. We have with us tonight 9 districts around the GTA area, and we have teachers who are collectively called Technology-Enabled Learning and Teaching Contacts, our TeLT-Cs, and we are connected to the ministry and helping to bring innovation and connectedness to the districts across Ontario. So with that tonight, we're bringing that forward. We are all behind the scenes here supporting our team across other districts, and there it is. You can see on the screen right now the boards that are collectively coming together to support you tonight and to bring this fantastic conversation forward. Tonight's theme is, we're of course with the Game Changer series, we'll be talking about the global competencies: critical thinking, collaboration, communication, creativity, and innovation. And with that, we bring that through a ministry resource, which is in draft mode, the 21st Century Competencies, and you can see by the link on the page here to EduGains. You can find it in this location on the EduGains website, and we'll be breaking that down a little bit for you tonight. And every 2 weeks, we're bringing that together to share a little bit more with you. If you'd like to join in the conversation, we'd love to hear your thoughts. And if you have any questions, we'd like to bring those forward to the team presenting tonight. And if you'd like to do so, on Twitter, we have a hashtag BEAGC, or short for Be a Game Changer. And the conversations are going there now. And if you'd like to tweet out and comment or add questions, we would love to bring those things forward and bring them into the conversation. So thank you for joining us.
So our journey so far, we were very pleased to hear Sir Ken Robinson speak directly about the competencies. We've heard the competency learning to learn, and all of the videos and resources for those sessions can be found in eCommunity. The link is there, and don't worry, we'll be posting that again at the end. Tonight, we have Laura McKay and Tanya Williamson from Halton District School Board, who will be speaking about critical thinking and problem solving. It's important before we go on, though, to note that there are many different approaches to representing 21st century competencies, and there's no single best framework. We are simply here in an attempt to bring forward some meaningful conversation and to present you with one particular view of covering the competency. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Tanya and Laura, and have a great evening, ladies.
Thanks so much, Patrick. My name is Tanya Williamson from the Halton District School Board. I'm here with my colleague,
Laura McKay.
And just a disclaimer, I do have a nasty cough, so I apologize in advance if I go into a coughing fit. I'll do my best to, I've got my cup of water here, so I think I'll be good. Thank you for joining us as we're talking about critical thinking and problem solving, one of the competencies that we'll be looking at in the virtual speaker series. And the slide that Laura's showing right here has all 6 of them, but in our particular slide deck, we're going to be focusing on 4. And the ones that are highlighted in blue are the ones that we're going to be focusing on. And as Patrick mentioned, we're just sort of providing you with an instructional strategy in order to move forward, but it's not the be-all and end-all.
Okay. And also, I'm going to apologize right now. We are new to this, doing the live streaming, and we're just figuring out the timing of moving through the slides. So I may be a little bit fast or a little bit slow. So just my apologies ahead of time. So just our agenda for this evening is that we're going to be looking at asking good questions, searching the answers of those questions and how that's done, recording of information, as well as how that you can be sharing your findings. And we're going to be pointing out the different components of the competency and how they're related to this different parts of the agenda.
All right, so in looking at the very first part about asking really good critical questions, because the route to inquiry is really all about asking questions. And the reason that we want to let students ask questions is so that they can drive their own learning. They can be active participants and the producers of their own knowledge. And the teacher will be acting as a co-learner rather than the driver of knowledge. So looking at concrete steps to address issues, and engaging in the inquiry process in order to try and solve problems.
Okay, and so to get us started, as we take a second to go on to the next slide, we're going to watch a clip about the big bad wolf, and we're hoping that everyone can hear this. So if you can't, you could maybe go on to YouTube and see. It's also called the Three Pigs Social Media. And while you're watching it, what we want you to think about, what are some real life questions and issues that this video would raise?
So I just want to also direct your attention, sort of at the bottom of the screen there, I've included a question matrix, which I use often in my class. And asking critical questions is a skill. And in order to get the students to try and generate critical questions, what I sometimes do is I get them to brainstorm questions on, like, back in the old days using sticky notes, and get them to categorize. So as you're thinking about questions that you want to ask during this video, you can use this question matrix as sentence starters, and then think about where you can categorize your question. Is it in the top left, sort of a knowledge-based question, what is, or is it more imaginative, so down to the bottom right, which is eventually where we want to get students to be in asking critical, insightful questions. How might something happen, for example?
Okay. Great, so I'll get this video.
So hopefully we'll get this video going.
Fingers crossed.
So the spotlight is once again shone on the grey area of homeowners' rights to protect their properties.
This isn't right. The three little pigs are the victims. Also down two houses. You've got what you get.
But the pigs went too far. People have every right to defend your property.
Boiling someone alive hardly constitutes reasonable
Somebody who's
force.
going to break the law and intrude.
You can't protect yourself in your own home.
A man's home is his castle.
Someone tried to blow my house down, I'd do the same.
I knew the wolf. There's no way he could have blown down those houses. He had asthma.
But the wolf had asthma. So what's the truth about the pigs' houses being blown down? Inside job.
No reason why those two houses, one made from straw, the other from wood, should have collapsed. Not even a healthy wolf snuff and puff could bring them down.
The three little pigs have confessed to conspiring to commit insurance fraud, framing the wolf in an attempt to cover their tracks. Their motive was financial, as they struggled to keep up with their mortgage repayments.
Guilt, I can empathise with it.
I'm behind on my payments too.
How did this have happened?
I've lost everything.
Great. So what we want you to do now for the next, it's still going. So what we'd like you to do now is to take a minute. So in your classroom, you would have students think about a question that they may ask. So what we'd like you to do right now is to go onto this link, and we're going to show one way that you could potentially brainstorm with your classes using technology. So we want you to think about that question that you were thinking about as you're watching that, a real life scenario of a question that you might ask. Go onto this link, and it's called a Google Drawing, and we'd like you to post your question.
I think how can we get the link onto the chat? Oh, perfect. Thanks, Patrick. I was just wondering how we were going to get that onto the chat.
Great, thank you. So you should see, so we have some questions already up there.
So we're drawing your attention.
We have added the link to the chat for everyone.
Thanks, Patrick. So we just wanted to draw your attention to this Google slide. This is a really great tool, not the only tool, but a way that students can brainstorm ideas or questions. And so please feel free, when you guys actually go into the e-community and have access to the slide deck, feel free to make a copy of it and to use this in your own classroom.
And it's really easy if you want to do to use this as a teacher. You just click on these little Post-it notes and you can make a copy of it. And so you can have as many Post-it notes as you want. You can write things on the Post-it notes. Sometimes we put things like "I was wondering" as the sentence starter. You can put sentence starters on these Post-it notes. And then you just have the kids, they just drag them on and they type in their questions. So we see some people in there. That's great. We have some questions getting posted.
Yeah, so thanks so much for your contributions. And the great thing about leaving it so open-ended is that the students will really tackle a question that they're interested in. So it really is a way to differentiate, and the question and subsequently the research that they do will be driven by their own passion and their own curiosity. So by taking ownership of their own learning, then they're more likely to be engaged in the inquiry process. And as an educator, you would not necessarily sit back, but be a co-learner with the students as you're helping them move along and scaffold the process.
Right. And also, yeah, when a student's coming up with their own question, they're going to want to find out their own answer. So they are going to be a little more engaged in the process.
Yeah. So really, they're really being more active participants, right, in their own learning rather than just passive recipients of knowledge.
Mm-hmm.
And as we're going through this process, if there's anything that you've done either similarly or in terms of critical thinking, I mean, there's lots of different ways to present critical thinking in the classroom and implement it. Please feel free to share on the live chat, because we do have some folks who are monitoring this. Why should people be here? Who are monitoring this that can bring us to our attention so we can include it as part of our discussion at the end.
And some other similar tools, like we said, this is a Google Drawing. There's also Padlet, which is an amazing tool. We use that all the time in our classrooms. There's another tool called Linoit and Stormboard and Space. There's a plethora of tools. These are just some, and back to in the e-community, when we post this, we will have links to all these different tools if you want to try this one or other ones, along with things of how to do them and some examples.
And just looking in the live chat, Mr. S, before reading, students can predict what a book is about. And this is a really excellent way of brainstorming and making predictions. So yes, this tool absolutely can be used in many different ways.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And this is a good starting point too, that you will see how kids are asking questions, but these questions that they may post up here, this is just a brainstorm. This is the start of them thinking. From there, then you're going to be able to work with your students and streamline streamline the questions, so that sometimes it's depending on the age or their ability to do this, they may ask questions that aren't answerable, or they may ask questions that maybe to get at the answers might be above their abilities. So you can work with your students afterwards to help kind of streamline these questions. Great. That's great. I like to see all these different types of questions. You can see that it's all different age level, potential different subject areas, or different age levels that maybe students might be asking questions.
And the one thing that, like, my background is science, geography, and I would still use a video like this early on in the semester, because it doesn't necessarily have to tie to the content of the course. I mean, we have skills that we focus on in science. Inquiry skills is one of them. So it doesn't necessarily have to be, I mean, we could approach it from a scientific lens, but it's just to say, I'm just trying to reiterate that when we're going through and trying to implement inquiry, sometimes we have to step back a little bit from the content that we're trying to, implement and make it more application-based for the students.
So we're just going to move on from there. Thank you so much for sharing those questions. And it's really interesting to see those questions. Some of them I would never have thought of, taking that different slant than what we took on when we were looking at this video. Okay. So this was just the instructions. There's the matrix, there's the instructions. So back to, if you want to have this slide deck, you can use it. And here's instructions of how to use this Google Drawing. So why should we let students ask questions?
Yeah, so as I mentioned before, really providing students with problems, as a way of scaffolding, this is a great way to do it, because really, students, we want to let them, their own curiosity and their own passion drive the competency and to drive the inquiry.
Okay. And And then what we were talking about is that when you kind of start with the students and they're brainstorming their questions, and then you want to kind of streamline, you want to get them thinking about, why is this a good question? What makes up a good question? So you want to help with that critical thinking of, yes, you've asked a question, but here's some criteria of what actually makes a good question.
So ensuring that it stems from curiosity and thinking about the world, and questions also that they're passionate about. So invoking deep thinking and feeling, leading to more questions. And the really important one is that it is open-ended, and it does require support and justification. So this is where that critical thinking piece comes in. Not just a yes or no question, but something that requires some sort of explanation or justification that they need to research.
And I've done this with my science guys, and they help come up with what is a criteria for a good question. So it helps them also think about, when they're thinking about their questions, what makes up a good question, and whether or not the question they ask, they can then kind of look at it and look at some of the criteria and do a little bit self assessment of how they're doing with their question.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so then your next step that you might be wanting to do throughout the 21st century competency is, and this should be up in a second.
Yeah, just a little time delay here, folks. So looking at answering questions. So now that a student has a critical question, how is it that they're going to go about and answer that particular question? So leaving the learning to the student and driving that learning.
And the components of that 21st century competency, the critical thinking, is taking the concrete steps, engaging in the inquiry process, once again, and also interpreting, analyzing information to make decisions based on the research they do answering these questions.
So often when students go off and start doing research, they'll type in a some type of question or topic, and they hit Google and they take the first 5 hits that they see. So it is a very overwhelming process for students. So what we want to ask as educators are, what are some of the steps that you're going to take in order to support their inquiry journey? So one of the questions that we're going to take from the Google slide is the fact, based on the video, do people have the right to protect their property in any way?
So what we did, we threw that into a Google search, and we went, do people have the right to protect their property in any way? Which is what students do all the time. And we came up with 409 million results in 0.69 seconds. So as an adult, I look at that and go, wow, that's a little overwhelming. As a student, it can be incredibly overwhelming. So they're going to hit the first one, whether or not that's a credible resource, whether or not that is information that is at their appropriate level, whether or not they can interpret it, whether or not it's even proper for what they're researching. They're going to hit those first 3 sites because there's so much to wade through. So what we wanted, this is part of the thing they want to do, is to help them do some critical thinking about what is good information. And one way of doing that to kind of start them on this path of doing that critical thinking is what's called a custom search, custom Google search. And if any of you guys have used these, you could probably talk about how effective they are and how useful they are for helping students move them along in that research process.
Or even in terms of where you're at in teaching. So even in terms of the grades appropriate, like what grade have you used this for that you found that it was useful?
Okay. And I'm just going to open up. So I made a Google search that was about protecting your property. And what I did, I picked 5 websites that I thought students would be able to use to answer that question. So I'm going to put in my original question was,
do people have the right to protect their property? So as we're doing this, if you guys want to also join along and open Google search in a new window, type in your particular question and see how many hits it gets.
Okay, so this should just take a second. So I typed in my question. So the original question before the custom search was I had 409 million hits. And then when I made a Google search that I customized it with using just 5 credible sites, now a student's only going to get 4 results, which is a lot more manageable, and they're going to feel a little less overwhelmed, and they're going to be able to get at the information and find the appropriate information, and from there do their synthesis, their analysis and synthesis information without a ton coming at them.
Yeah. It's also a great way for teachers to familiarize themselves with the websites ahead of time or the resources ahead of time. So this way, hopefully also limits the amount of plagiarism that students might engage in, since you are familiar with the information on the sites. It also really leads to really great examples of what is a good source and what's a bad source, because if you were to include a non-credible source in there, and you can try and create an activity where students might be able to try and figure out which one is good source, which one's a bad source, for example.
And
I'm
going to, ladies, if we can back up just a little bit.
Oh, sure.
So there's been some good chat there and some good things, but I think maybe if we can come back to the search for a moment, and just if you can maybe talk to it a little bit. But while one of you is doing that, the today's meet and things in the background, if you want to take a quick look at that, that would be probably helpful. And we've got some questions that we're trying to gather. And just a reminder to everyone else that they need to, if they have questions, please post them either on Twitter using the hashtag or in the live chat. And I think we'll come back and we might revisit this. I can see there's some people saying that they're looking for further detail about the Google custom search. And I know that this is not a session about that, but I think perhaps we can go over just one more time a little bit about why and how and what it actually does. I'm assuming someone's checking off the today's meet.
Yes, I checked that. Thank you.
Thank you.
So the questions about how to use a Google custom search.
Okay, so Google custom search, I'm just opening it right now. And there's the link up there, the csa.google.ca. And all you do is you add whatever websites that you want your students to use. So you're going to pick, depending on the grade level, maybe it's only 3 for, say, your little kindies, or for grade 12, maybe it's even 15 sites. And you can throw those in there. You put the links right in the sites to search. And so for mine, do I have mine up here? So, it's disappeared on me. Okay, I did 5 different websites, and then what you do is you just save it, and then you get this new URL that you then, instead of the students going and just to Google to type in their search, they put the URL in the browser. That opens up the window like I had shown you. So if you see at the top there, give me a second.
Sorry, there's a bit of a delay here.
Delay. Is that up? Yeah, okay. So you see at the top there, I would give them the URL of my Google search, and then they'll open it up and they're going to see not Google, they're going to see my search. So that's going to close in a second. So they're going to see my search that I've created instead of the Google search. So it's super, super easy. It's you just taking that time to find out the sites that would be most applicable for your students.
And again, just addressing some of the questions, we would be doing that because when we Googled something, when we just go to Google, we get 490 million answers.
Yep.
So as the teacher, wanting to narrow down to some very specific sources to have people use those sources only, this is a mechanism whereby students can still search and find information, but they're only able to search those sites that I, as the educator, have deemed appropriate or containing the information that I think is relevant. Now, depending on your curricular goal, this may or may not align with your philosophy and what you're attempting to do. Sometimes we want students to have to sift through a lot of material, but as Laura and Tanya had mentioned, if we're dealing with, particularly I'm thinking primary students and very young students, 490 million possible answers is far too much. So if we can limit them to 2, maybe 3 websites that they're searching, we can then help them to develop some of those critical thinking skills by working through with them about the information that they're looking at.
Yes, and it's also, you could use it to just, if you're doing something around digital citizenship or just that being a discerning adult or young adult in the high school years, in that when I'm opening a website, is this credible? And you could use these searches. You could put non-credible websites there if you're wanting them to do that critical thinking of what is a credible versus a not credible website. So this custom search could be used to help kids narrow down their stuff, but it also can be used to help them to learn how to be critical thinking on the internet. Okay, great. And what we posted down at the bottom here is a link to it's a resource that we've created. There's a lot of acronyms out there about credibility. Some of them are CARP and CRAP and Kapow, and it's just a tool of that students can use, and it's the Kapow stands for is an acronym for a variety of criteria for determining whether or not a website is a good website or not. I'm just opening it now, so it should just take a second there.
So this is something that's a ready-made resources. I mean, you can't take credit for building it. I'm not even sure where you got it from, Laura. But it's something that's out there. Feel free to modify. And it's something that you can print off or use in your classroom, set it up in your Google Classroom, and your students can use it. So we've got the criteria here, and also towards the bottom end of it is a checklist that students could use for each of their sources that they're evaluating.
Okay. Great. So someone was asking about students creating their own Google search. I think that would be a great idea, because then they could be sharing, if they've made their own search, that they could do in group work and have students, if they have maybe an article that, or an idea, or a current event, and they want to be sharing that in small group work, and they could have other students doing some research about that, or just to be sharing something with the class or with the teacher. I think that's a great idea, having students create their own. Okay. Great. Anything else you want to add?
Nope.
Okay. So then the next stage that once now, so the student has created this question. You've hopefully narrowed down the question so it's an answerable question. Then the students have done some research. The next step, now they have all this information, and how are they going to organize it?
So part of, like in the past, often we assign students a topic, and as part of a project, and we evaluate the end product. They create a pamphlet or a poster or PowerPoint, Pretsies, whatever. But the process that they undertake to get to that point is also extremely important. So it's really important for students to share their information and to make their learning visible. And the way that I've done this in my classes in the past has been to use Mindomo, which is a mind mapping software, which is supported by the ministry. So it's the way that I had students visualize or represent visually the research process in terms of taking notes. Because they're able to link content, they're able to upload videos, they're able to upload images, and also make commentary. It's something that this particular mind map is collaborative as well. So if they share it with me, then I would provide them with some feedback, they would make necessary changes, so on and so forth. So teacher and student, that relationship is one of co-learning.
And I think this part of the process is often not spent, there's not enough time spent on that. A lot of times there's not enough emphasis. And I think what happens is the students will have all this information, and they're trying to get it into a format that they can hand into the teacher. And I think that without being able to organize it, that they can't make those connections. They can't get it into a way that they can express their understanding, because they just have this big amount of information. So this is just one way of helping to organize. And I think it's something that we as teachers really need to help support students in this process. So as Tanya said, this is a mind mapping tool, is the Mindomo. The MindMeister is also a mind mapping tool, and the Evernote, which is similar to like a OneNote, is more like a way of collating information, but not necessarily in the mind map. So once again, we are just giving some tools out there to give you an idea. The key thing here is helping students organize information, however that looks. So we just give you some ideas of what you can do with this.
Yep. And also, we've put an image of the pedagogy wheel, which is if you just type in pedagogy wheel into a Google search, this will pop up, and it's a great tool that aligns digital resources, different tools with different ways of thinking, and no, that's okay, and ways of doing. Okay. So now that the students have been asking really critical questions, they have been researching information and analyzing and interpreting and coming up with sources that are valid. And
before we get there,
sure.
There is one question,
Sure.
and so someone is asking specifically about the validity of the information. And so we've talked now about organizing, and they've actually, do we want students to be looking at Wikipedia materials or credible sources, was really how it was worded. I think that I have my personal sense of it, but I thought maybe we could ask you about how you would be using the tools that you've talked about or the strategy that you're referring to specifically in an example on how to ensure that students are actually citing credible sources or recognizing when sources are not credible.
It's a good point. And I know with Wikipedia, I don't discourage the use of Wikipedia in my classroom. I encourage students to use it as a starting point because it's a really good place to get some background information on a topic. And then from there, use that as a springboard to search for different types of sources. For myself as a high school, senior high school teacher, I strongly encourage the use of databases and through our library and things like that, which have resources that have been vetted and have been evaluated by peers. So in my experience, I use Wikipedia as a starting point for students.
And also, if you look in Wikipedia at the bottom, they have those links that are to other credible sources. But we all
maybe credible sources.
Yeah, okay, maybe credible.
Other places to search.
I do find though too that we always say to our students, there's some great online databases and they're supported by our schools, but I know that students they'll say, yeah, thank you very much, but they go right to the Google anyways, whether or not they know that there's a resource, a database out there that they can use. They will often just still go right to Google and type in that right into the tool, into the browser, and type in their question. So I think that we really need to be teaching our students what is credible. And that was that Kapow thing would help them to discern what's credible and what is not credible. And what you're looking for things like bias, right? If you're going to be looking for climate change, you're probably not going to be looking at the website done by the oil company. So we want to be talking to them about what is credible, looking at biases and all those things. So I think it's actually that's part of this whole critical thinking is you're critically analyzing the research that you're looking at.
Mm-hmm. No, but that would be exactly it. And I think Wikipedia is one of those interesting things. And when we're in the age of social media and the age of fake news, I think that critical thinking and problem solving are especially relevant. I remember taking a master's course where we actually had gone through and done some research using Wikipedia, and it's surprisingly accurate at times. But I think that the real skill and the challenge is ensuring that those of us that are interpreting the information or looking at the information are being critical mm-hmm. and attempting to make sure that what we're looking at are correct. But I think, again, it's important. The critical literacy skill and the critical thinking and problem solving skill is essential. So I think that it is I think tied together, what you've been talking about, the use of the refined search, et cetera, and now we're going to be getting into some organizational pieces, are all meant to help students develop those skills. So we recognize that at the elementary level, we have to be much more constraining on students in an effort to help them develop that. And then as they grow, the intent would be that as they interact more and more with all sorts of media or resources, that they then have those skills to be critical about it and are making wise decisions and selecting resources.
And it's funny, as you're talking, Patrick, I just glanced into the live chat of YouTube and a couple of people making comments about maybe you should be looking at the oil company. I'm like, you know what? You're right. We should be. You should be looking at where a company that has a vested interest, and maybe they have some great research. And I think it's great to do a comparison, and it's great to see both sides of an issue, right? So yes, for sure, I backpedal there. That's great. Yes, and I think that too, even with the Wikipedia, then maybe you do those custom searches. One includes Wikipedia, maybe one doesn't include Wikipedia, and looking at the information that you get from the custom search that included Wikipedia. Maybe you have the one when you're doing the climate change where you include the oil company and maybe not include the oil company, and look at the information that comes out of the both. Okay. Anything else?
No. Okay.
Okay.
So just moving on.
Okay. So the next step then, now we've done our question, we've done our research, we've done our organizing of our research, and then the next step in the critical thinking competence or the inquiry or this process would be sharing the information. And the competency component that would be related to sharing of the research is making connections and transferring learning from one situation to another. Okay.
So when students are sharing information, educators really need to provide authentic, meaningful ways for students to share their learning in ways that benefit the students, that meet the needs of the student. So what we have for the particular question that we asked about, do people have the right to protect their property in any way? After the student has gathered all their information and wants to present it to an appropriate audience, they can take on a role. For example, a lawyer who's using notes, a lawyer's notes using a podcast to do the closing arguments. In the video, we saw, the pigs being whisked away to the courthouse, but there's a lot of bystanders standing around, and everyone seems to have an opinion. So posting that opinion in a blog, or a filmed confession of the perpetrator using Screencastify, which is a great digital tool, Chrome extension that's really easy to use. And or a victims' rights groups putting on an advertising campaign using PictoChart, which is a great digital tool that creates infographics.
So for some of you, you may recognize our format of the raft, the role, audience, format, and topic. And when we were picking these, what we were thinking about, these are just back to, we were just trying to give you guys a starting point of ideas. And we were trying to think of different roles, different viewpoints, and also different ways. So all the different technologies. So we picked like the blogging, the Screencastify, because these are things that we've done in our classrooms and things that we've seen other people do. We have a lot of like our e-learning classes and stuff doing things with podcasts and Screencastify. The PictoChart that's a way of doing infographics. But these are just examples. So what we were actually hoping is maybe some of you guys out there, when you were thinking back at the video, the 3 pigs, maybe an authentic question that you would have asked. Is there something that you guys could think of, maybe share with other people, of a role that you could, or something that your students, or that maybe you, if you were asking that question, how would you share your information? What sort of technology would you potentially use? What role could you take on when you were sharing your information? So I just wanted to give you a minute and maybe think about that and maybe throw something in the chat. Give it a minute. Yeah. No? Okay. Maybe as we continue, someone might be able to have an idea of some things that, or something in the past.
The question about, there's still debate and discussion going on about how do you develop critical literacy skills and why it's so important. So I think I think people are really grappling with some of that and having discussion about it. But to your, it's important certainly to be able to have students organize and then share their information in a meaningful way, which could or could not elicit even greater bias depending on what they're talking about or trying to present.
Right.
Absolutely. And it's so important for students to, even as they're researching and they're organizing their information, to keep asking critical questions that will eventually, inform and empower them to make informed decisions. And looking at issues from different perspectives is so important. It brings in a lot of critical thought in order to really help them make informed decisions about what's out there. What's valid, what isn't, what's true, what isn't. And you make that point about, the idea of fake news now. So in today's day and age, with students having access to so much information at their fingertips, it is crucial that they understand how it is to look for information that is reputable and valid and true.
Yep. And I think when we were talking about doing sharing of information, possibly your students may have asked questions that didn't have answers and actually only led to more questions. So maybe at this point, they may not even be ready. They've done their research and they don't have any answers, or all they've come up with maybe is more questions. And back to, I think, what you said at the beginning, and this is cyclical, that you may not, it's not that this isn't always linear. It's not that you're starting with a question, you've done your research and you gather your information. Now I'm done, boom, put a nice bow on it. Here, I've shared it with you. Maybe now we're going back to the cyclical and going, okay, well, what more questions will you have elicited from your original question? Actually, I wanted to mention one other thing about the sharing, is that also you want to be thinking, when we were doing these, we had a lot of discussion about when we had done these, it was our ideas, but then we were also thinking this would be great for maybe the people in your room at that moment in time, but you wouldn't be able to use them for your next group of students, because you also got to be thinking about the learner in your room, where their interests lie, where their abilities, and maybe you want them to be making decisions about how they want to share it, what role they want to take on, and have them come up with these as opposed to maybe you doing it for them. Oh, we see some people. All right. Okay. So essentially, there
was a question just while you're there. Sorry, if we can back up one slide.
Sure.
Someone had posted a question about media ownership and how that affects the message and the importance of tying that in, specifically in the case of fake news and things of that nature. Have you had any experiences with that? And then after that, there's one other question that's been posed that I think is timely and important.
Okay. So, sorry, what was the question again, Patrick? About media?
It was about media ownership. So how those who own the media can shape the message.
Ooh.
And the importance of this skill in a time where, you've got, I don't know how many major corporations that are really functioning as shaping what people are hearing and having access to.
That's a really good point, because not only are kids bombarded, within a school system about asking questions and going and researching information. When they go home and on social media, they're bombarded by the same sort of thing. So in terms of the media, I think along with all of this, I think that there was some talk about bias in there, and getting the students to understand what bias is, and to again ask questions, critical questions about what they're viewing. Who is the intended audience? Who is behind, or corporation is behind the message, and is it something that is really that they can embrace? So I think in terms of media, I think it's also very important to be asking such critical questions, outside of the school system as well. When the kids go home and they're texting with friends and they're watching commercials on YouTube and on TV, that's really important as well.
Yeah, and I also think that I remember hearing this, that our world is determined by sound bites, right? Like everything's a sound bite, and I think it's really important that students learn to dig deeper, right? That they just see this like one sentence and they draw these conclusions, and that sentence is purposely done as a like a shock, right? That's what the media is trying to sell papers, so they're doing these shock statements to grab your attention. And I think that students need to learn, all of us really need to learn to dig deeper on what they're seeing, and also looking for more than one source of what they're seeing, because there is, like Tanya was saying, there's bias a lot of times in who's reporting those news. So you need to be looking at all different sides of these of the information out there.
And I always tell my my own kids, question everything.
Yeah, question authority. And sorry, Patrick, you said there was another question?
Yes. So we're just going back and forth in the background here.
Okay.
So there are some questions related specifically to linking back, because you had talked about inquiry at the beginning. And I know inquiry is one of the bullet points that it mentions it specifically in the inquiry model. And so there's a question about students that are curious, needing to find research and doing their own things. And we're just wondering if you could tie back some of what we've done directly to the inquiry model. And I know both of you are very familiar with that model.
So, you mean the actual, like, this is actually what we were doing is based very much on the inquiry model, because one of those components is
so make it explicit is what I'm saying. Make it explicit.
Okay.
So you've done the inquiry model. So the critical piece related specifically, they're wanting to draw back, they're wanting to see the direct connection between what you've done and inquiry classroom. So I know that you've done the inquiry model, but what I'm hearing in the feedback we've gotten in our Google form is that some of the people are not seeing the connection as clearly. But I think because we've lived with your slide deck and we've gone over it, we see it very clear.
Okay.
So if you can simply comment back to the inquiry model and maybe the components that you did in your slide deck, that might be helpful.
So in terms of, like, asking questions?
So that you start when you're doing the inquiry model, the first stage of an inquiry model is asking a question. And then once you've asked that question.
So you've asked questions tonight?
Yes. So the first so the first part is what we had you guys was watch the video. And once you watch the video is that you were asking a question about what you saw the video. What would be a question that you would be curious about based on the video that we watched? So that's the first stage of the inquiry process. It's now I've asked a question. The next stage of the inquiry process is you want to be getting some information to help make some decisions, or to maybe not answer, but get some more information about the question that you asked. And that's where we did the Google custom search. And so we looked in and we looked at gathering some information. We used the Google custom search. We also had the capacity, the credibility. So then that's the next stage. The students have now gathered all that information. And then the next stage of the process is you want to be organizing and trying to make connections and decisions based on the information.
And also to jump in, taking that information and analyzing and interpreting it, and trying to, weed out what's important or what isn't to support answering the question.
Right? Looking at biases, am I removing biases, or am I addressing biases when you're looking at the information that you've gathered? And in that stage, that's when you're organizing the data. And we did that through the mind mapping, looking at the mind map, the Mindomo, the MindMeister.
So just providing you with some examples of how students could do that with Mindomo, MindMeister, and Evernote.
And then the next stage then was we were looking at drawing conclusions. Maybe not necessarily answers, but trying to draw conclusions based on the original question, which is at the end of the inquiry process, which is this stage here is where you're sharing of your information. And this sharing of information is just
communication.
The communication of the information. You could be doing a lab report. You could be doing an essay. We were just thinking of maybe ways that were a little more engaging, where the students could maybe buy in and take on a role doing the sharing of that information this way.
Okay. I hope that answers the question. Sorry, we weren't clear initially, but hopefully that answers.
No, it's hard when you're trying to synthesize all the information as it's going by, and we're trying hard in the background to capture everybody's ideas. So as many people who are watching know, we've got a team of people in the background, and the screen just keeps going on us. But I think essentially, really, the one comment here is that being able to conduct reliable research is the bedrock of good inquiry learning. And so you're doing lots of critical thinking, and you talked about that quite a bit tonight.
Absolutely.
So I think that you've addressed it, and I think the comparison was a very nice one. So you've modeled tonight, and you've how it links directly to classroom practice.
Okay. So just to conclude and consolidate, and remember, we can continue the discussion through the community. So just some takeaways here. What did you see here today so far that made you know that critical thinking and problem solving was occurring? So we just actually kind of went through that. We just kind of answered that. And then thinking about your own learning and anticipating some of the challenges. So now that we've gone through this process, thinking about how you might use something like this in your classroom, if it applies, what sort of challenges might you anticipate? And then thinking about what you can do to help support those learners and help resolve or mitigate some of those challenges. So these are some thoughts that we want you to take away with and continue discussion. We welcome to continue the discussion in our community, where again, we will post this full slide deck with all of the links to our resources in which you guys can take away and use in your own classrooms if you feel that you'd like to.
Yeah, and we're hoping that like we said, we just kind of gave a starting point of what is the competency, the critical thinking competency, with the focus kind of on the inquiry model. We're hoping that you guys are able to take something away tonight and try something in your classroom. Like I said, this is just a starting point. And these are some questions that we want you to think about before, during, as you're trying it, before you start trying it, and maybe some thoughts that you can share with us in the e-community going forward. That would be great. We'd love to have some feedback.
Thanks. Thank you very much, folks.
So, and just I guess that one final thing is there any final questions?
I have a question for you. First of all, you can hear me there?
Yep.
Yes.
Okay. A few moments ago, you had mentioned, I thought it was a neat little resource, I think you called it Kapow. And you said there were a few other website credibility resources again. I just thought that was something, maybe a little plug again for that. A bit of a questionnaire, because teachers will often ask us, how do I know? What are my guiding steps to know if it's reliable or not? What are my look fors? And I know sometimes it's very difficult for a user to be able to look at a website and tell its credibility, but you gave some really neat little look fors in there to start that conversation going to say, does it do A, B, and C? At least, again, like you mentioned with the Wikipedia site as a starting point to dig deeper into a resource. And I thought today, with everything going on, it was a great idea to be able to, critical thinking and critical issues is a neat component at this point with regards to our resources out there and a plethora of resources out there to start those conversations going. So again, can you just mention again what those resources were? I think one of the slides you called the website credibility, I believe.
Oh yeah, the Kapow website credibility is actually a resource that I developed with one of our guests tonight. Throw out there to her.
Hi, Cindy Cosentino.
We built this resource, and it was a collation of a bunch of stuff out there, so I'm not going to take full credit for it. Okay. And there's a bunch of acronyms. There's the one that's called CARP, or it's CRAP, or it's Kapow. And please be welcome to use our Kapow. And it's just they're just look fors. That acronym, the Kapow, is just look fors of things students look for when they are looking at a website. I'm looking at the currency. I'm looking at
who's the author. The reliability of it, so on and so forth.
Yes. So it's just something that in that resource that we've shared with you, there is what those different letters represent. Then there's 2 websites in there that are little instructions of how to use it. And then there's a checklist that you can give to your students. So when they look at the website, there's questions there that they can go and ask the question of the website that they're using. So it's just one of the resources that we had put together. And it's a great website, a great tool for students to use.
And one thing that you can do if you're just starting off and introducing this concept to your students is pick a couple of websites and get them into groups. Provide each group with one of those checklists and get them to each group to evaluate it, and then have a little debate about the credibility of the site. And it would be interesting because, you know, some students might come and approach the evaluation of the website in different ways, because we all know that they all have different backgrounds and they have different experiences. So they might look at websites in terms of the credibility in different ways. So using the checklist and having them sort of debate about what's credible, what isn't, might be a great learning activity for them as they engage in this process.
Okay. Yep. Great. Any other questions?
Thank you very much for allowing us to have the stage here and share our experiences on critical thinking and problem solving.
Thank you very much, ladies. And so I have the pleasure of thanking Laura McKay and Tanya Williamson for their wonderful presentation this evening. But before I get to thanking everyone who's done work behind the scenes, I want to make sure we note that our next session is April 6th at 8 p.m. And at that time, we will be going over innovation, creativity, and entrepreneurship. And we will again have some TeLT-Cs from the Greater Toronto Area leading that session. Until then, we do want you to keep the conversation going using the Be a Game Changer hashtag and through our online Be a Game Changer environment. The link is there. Again, we will send that out and we'll post it so everybody knows. But before we leave for the evening, I want to thank Bia Meglio and Kathy Blacklock from the Ministry of Education from the Technology-Enabled Learning Ontario Division. And in the background, we had lots of people, as I noted earlier. That included Jeff Cummings from Wellington Catholic District School Board, Joe Russo from the Toronto Catholic District School Board. We had Andy Quishan with us here on the screen, but in the background, we had Nuno De Castro and Kelly McDougall from Dufferin Peel District School Board. John Hamilton joined us today from the Upper Grand District School Board. Joanne Kenny from Halton Catholic District School Board, Shelley Lowry from the Toronto District School Board, and of course we had the two ladies this evening who did a wonderful job. They were risk takers. They did a video. They tried to do something collaborative. We pushed them. We said, go for it. And I'm so glad that it worked for you. Thank you very much to Laura McKay and to Tanya Williamson again. My name is Patrick McQuaid. I'm from the Peel District School Board. Thank you very much for joining us. And we look forward to seeing you again in April for our next session. Have a good night, everybody. And we'll see you next time.
Good night. Thank you.